Welcome to Horror Makes Us Happy, the podcast where we ask the question, what is it about horror that makes us happy? Your hosts are Steve Becker and myself, Chris Whitman, and you can find out more about us at our website, horrormakesushappy.com. It's a very difficult URL to remember. It's the name of the show. That is the name of the website. It's .com, not .org or .net. Or the other ones. There's like a million now because TLDs are different. Anyway, before we get started, this is the trigger warning. This is a horror podcast, so we will be talking about horror things, which could involve sensitive subjects such as child abuse, F-bombs, R-bombs. We'll talk about bad stuff, but we might not talk about bad stuff because we don't always talk about bad stuff. But there's a chance that we talk about bad stuff, so we have to do this bad stuff.
So if you don't like bad stuff,
go away. And with the fun part out of the way, actually, what's kind of fun? Steve, what do we got coming up?
Oh, lots of stuff. I think we are still up to having 12 people on the guest list, so not going to go through all of that. But we are doing listen parties and drawing parties on Discord, drawing parties for Whitman's webcomic Pieces, which is a horror-themed webcomic. And I've got my book, A Guide to the Recovery Toolbox, which you can get on Amazon and Smashwords and Lulu and all kinds of different places like that. But today we are talking to Mr. Ethan Richards, who's the author of Caw Lake and the Dark Lord of Oklahoma. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure.
Welcome to the show.
Before we get into the meat of the interview, you want to let us know what you're currently working on?
Yes. So I recently had a book come out in September titled Meth Gator.
Nice.
So that I've been working the marketing with that. My publisher is Primal Publishing. It's been a blast working with them. I have Dark Lord of Oklahoma and its sequel, Dark Elf of Oklahoma, and then I am working to finish that trilogy this year, or in the next year or two as well.
Okay.
Does the Dark Elf of Oklahoma have a large black cat with him by any chance?
No, unfortunately.
Okay, so it's not Dritz. All right.
Oh, I was thinking like Orko and Battle Cat.
No, wasn't it Dritz O'Riordan? Or no, he wasn't.
Yeah, Dritz Jordan. He's got the Panther with him.
Guinevere. Yeah, I know of D&D things, but I have never played because I'm
He's a Warhammer nerd instead.
Yeah,
That's why.
I like big spaceships and planet-killing lasers. You know what's wrong with that?
Different flavors.
Yes.
All right, so I don't know how much of the theme of the interview that we discussed beforehand. So just quickly, basically what we do is we ask about your love of horror through your childhood, teenage years, adulthood, and then talk about any common themes that have cropped up. And we might ask some deeper questions than you might be used to, but it's not meant to be a therapy session. So if you don't want to answer something, just hit pass and we'll move on. And not every question is necessarily going to land. Sometimes you ask stuff and they're like, just, but you don't know until you ask. So we ask some weird questions sometimes. But that being said, starting with childhood, what are some of your earliest memories of scary things?
Okay, so this is kind of interesting. At the cover of Meth Gator, the dedication, it says, if you grew up watching Monster Vision with your dad, or if you've got memories of watching Monster Vision with your dad, this book is for you. Mm-hmm. So obviously, there's a big influence from the those type of horror films, the kaiju horror films. But some of my earliest memories actually, when I was in kindergarten, I remember watching Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi, and Lon Chaney Jr. And the first kind of scary movie I watched was Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman with my dad on the earliest that I can remember is Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman with my dad on a Sunday evening. So that was a lot of fun. And my last book, Meth Gator, has a lot of nods actually to Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, or some nods to it.
Nice. Cool. Anything else jump out to you from those early years?
Let me see. So those are the early years. You can clearly see I was a big Godzilla fan, and that's kind of what I wanted to do, kind of explore with my other two novels is kaiju elements in, like, what if you set kaiju elements in a small town like Oklahoma, a small town across Oklahoma. So that's what I wanted to explore with that. Of course, I've scaled it down. I've scaled it down, so my monsters aren't like 400 feet tall. So it's more like 20 to 30 feet tall. And like, how would people?
That actually makes more sense, because I started laughing, thinking to myself, "There's not much in Oklahoma to destroy."
Yeah, right.
Like a 400 foot tall monster, it'd just be like smash. Okay, we're done here.
Yeah,
and you'd be able to see it coming from a mile away, literally. Like it's over there.
What the hell is that thing? Sorry, you were gonna say.
Oh, yeah. And then, so that was my earliest memory. Okay. And then when I was in the 8th grade, I remember American Movie Classic had the 1986 version of The Fly on.
Nice.
And that one has really stuck with me because my parents didn't want me to watch it, because obviously that's a really gross movie. So like I had to sneak around to watch it. So like I feel like I've earned that movie more than any other, like, you know what I mean? It was like it had to like do some clandestine operations to watch all of Seth Brundle's transformation from a healthy living scientist to Brundlefly at the end. And then another influence that you'd see in my work that I really liked is Jeepers Creepers. Obviously, there's the controversy of the creator of that series, but in terms of Jeepers Creepers, I loved that one. Like, really scared me when I saw it. That's like one of the last times I got so scared of a movie that I was like looking over my back. So, and the other thing that I love about horror is like I've seen this map of superheroes on like where they're located. And if you look at superheroes, they're all located on the East and West Coast, with the exception of the Flash, located in Central City. And I know I kind of sound like a dork saying all that, but like geographically, that's where they're located. But what I love about horror is cool because it is everywhere.
Yeah, it can happen anywhere.
Yeah. And I know Maine is still on the East Coast, but Stephen King, when he wrote Salem's Lot, he was talking to his wife. They were talking about what would Dracula look like in Brooklyn, and his wife said, well, he'd probably get hit by a car when he stepped out on the road. So from there, they're like, okay, he said it in Maine. So Maine's obviously East Coast, but like Maine's like, that, to me, that's like an easy. I've never been to Maine, but I've read some about it. That seems like that it's an easy location for a lot of really interesting.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you got the whole Miskatonic thing with H.P. Lovecraft. It's close to Maine, isn't it?
Well, it's also easy because it's his backyard, so he knows the place.
Yeah,
that too.
Right, what you know.
Yes.
Did you participate in Halloween when you were a kid?
Yep. And so I had a lot of fun with Halloween. It's so different now because now not everybody does Halloween, but I remember myself, Michael Morgan, and Cameron Wagerman. Like, I remember us walking what seemed like miles, going on our bikes and just going door to door. So that was a lot of fun. Always dressed up as scary stuff.
Did you have a favorite costume?
When I was 7 or 8 years old, I dressed up as the Terminator. So it had a flashing red eye, which was really cool. So it was a really good costume.
Nice. Did you have a least favorite costume? If not, that's fine.
No, I think like one time for college, I had like a last second thing where I dressed up with sunglasses and like a suit and tie, and that was kind of silly, but
like, I'm a businessman.
Yeah.
Of the 80s.
Yeah.
Here's some cocaine.
Yeah. I think that's like the most boring thing I've done.
Okay. So you liked it because it just was boring?
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's see.
Do you have any scary dreams as a kid?
There you go.
Okay. So this is kind of funny. For the longest time, I've had 2 reoccurring nightmares, and that's the Jeepers Creepers, the creeper from that, the unstoppable antagonist, which in Dark Elf, Oklahoma, the Dark Elf is inspired by the Creeper, where I wanted him to be like the Creeper, Terminator, or Godzilla, where unstoppable antagonist. And I hope I did that. So, but I've had the Creeper chasing me around in my dreams since I was like 16 years old. And then I've had some body horror dreams related to Brundlefly and the Fly as well. Okay. So
it's like they had a early, very effective influence on you.
Yeah.
Was there ever a time in real life that you were terrified as a child?
I think. Okay, remember, so I graduated high school in 2005, and so in the early 90s, they always talked about stranger danger.
Yeah.
Okay, so one time, I think a lady thought that I was someone else she knew, like another kid that she knew, and she invited me over for dinner, and that terrified me because I was thinking stranger danger the whole time. So
understandably. Yeah. Like, what kind of dinner are we talking about? Am I the dinner?
Yeah. And it was just because she was a stranger and she was talking to me.
Mm-hmm. So. Probably totally innocent, but yeah, I get it. Like,
yeah.
I don't know you.
Let's see. Flipping that question around, was there ever a time in your childhood when you felt completely calm or safe or bliss?
Oh, yeah. I had a really close relationship with my grandparents, so I don't ever remember being scared there, which is saying something because, well, I take that back. Sometimes it was kind of scary because I was a little kid and they both of them lived out of town. But around my grandparents, I felt very safe, and around my parents. So I have felt bliss around them quite a bit.
Okay.
So.
You had brought up Jeepers Creepers and this unstoppable antagonist. I actually did want to ask you about that movie and what scared you. Is that the thing that scared you the most about that movie?
Yes, and I love, obviously, like there's the controversy with Victor Salva, which but I loved everything about that movie. It was like the slow reveal, and then the thing. I think it's halfway point when you see the monster's wing, and I should have said spoiler alert, but you see his wing pop up.
It's been long enough now. Yeah, I love that scene when she hits him with the truck, and all of a sudden it's like, I mean, there's no allusion or alluding to that at all in the beginning of the story. Just all of a sudden, like, if I may steal a phrase from recent Star Wars films, they fly now.
Yeah. Yeah, that was so good. But the thing that I love about Jeepers Creepers, one thing I want to point out is it's scary in the daylight. So when they drive by the church and they see him dumping bodies in broad daylight, that's terrifying. And I remember getting anxious about that. And then immediately they have that truck chasing them. But that was all in the daylight. So that automatically builds tension to where you know the night is coming and you know that it's going to be terrifying.
Right,
So,
like it's scary now. It's about to get even worse because
yeah,
that's a thing I hear commonly in horror that is very effective. Is just setting things in daytime because it leaks the terror into that realm where you think you're safe.
Yeah.
What about Frankenstein meets Wolfman?
I just remember that being really cool. But I actually went back and rewatched parts of that when I was writing Meth Gator. And I loved an evil scientist, a mad scientist, especially nowadays when, like if you I've tried to tie mad scientists like with the tech gurus or something like that when I write, because that would be really creepy. So like,
it would. Yeah,
an evil version of Mark Zuckerberg or an evil version of Elon Musk.
I mean, eviler.
Yeah. And so like, and that's what I kind of wanted to explore with that. And then in Meth Gator, I hope I wasn't too over the top, but like they're trying to do two characters are trying to do a blood transfusion from one person to the other, exactly like that scene from Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, and then they've got Tesla coils going all over the place, and then of course
Tesla coils.
Yeah, Tesla coils are always great.
And Godzilla. Did you have a favorite Godzilla movie?
Oh man, yes. So for the longest time, my favorite one was Godzilla 1985, which that one's really interesting to talk about because the way that I saw it has not been released on DVD. So you can get Godzilla Returns or Godzilla 1984 is what I believe sometimes called, but that's entirely the Japanese version. The Raymond Burr version is only available on VHS and not available on DVD. So that was, for the longest time, that was my favorite one. And then the most recent one, Shin Godzilla. I've worked in government for a few years now, and I love the fact that is a horror movie that makes staff work kind of interesting.
It kind of does.
Yeah, it's really funny that way, but like I also love that aspect of it because I think it would be kind of cool to use horror movies to kind of explore some, and this will sound kind of funny, but Stephen King actually talks about it in his book on writing, how people are always interested in jobs. And like, I would love to kind of explore like park rangers, and I live in Texas and we have park police. I would love to explore, and I am with one of my novels, explore like how would a park ranger or park police officer, how would they respond to a monster out in the woods? Like what they go through. And so
it's an angle you don't really hear about too often. Like, I guess security guard has been done, and but just that kind of brings it close to home when you write just general day-to-day occupation in your horror like that.
Yeah.
When you said Shin Godzilla makes staff work interesting, what did you mean by that?
All right, so I've been a military officer since I was 23 years old, 2009. I've done a lot of time on staff. So staff is where you sit behind the computer and you do analysis. And what's cool about Shin Godzilla is you see those guys sitting behind the computer and working and talking side by side. And then in the very end, when they come up with their plan, I can't remember what it is, but when they start spraying stuff in his mouth, like they've had this whole plan determined. And the other thing that I love is in staff work, like everyone wants everything to look really pretty. But at the end of that movie, they're like, okay, this isn't pretty. Get out all the weirdos and they're going to solve this problem for us. So like you literally, and that's something else that's really interesting is like all the people who don't care about having their boots polished are the kind of the heroes in Shin Godzilla because they're out there and they think about things different. And they're the ones that come up with the way to defeat Godzilla.
Okay. When you mentioned the Raymond Burr version of Godzilla 1985, what was different about that you liked?
I really like the tension. It is in the Japanese version as well, but the Raymond Burr, he kind of like obviously there's the translation, but he kind of conceptualized it a little bit easier for me as an American to understand. Because he brought the American perspective, and so when you're watching it, you can kind of relate to him, and he had the same role in the original Godzilla.
Okay,
so it's kind of like I would almost say like a cultural translation. So he's the guy like you can kind of relate to as an American. And then the other thing that's really interesting that I always love to explore, and I try to explore in my writing, is second and third order effects. In Godzilla, what's happening between the US and Russia when a giant monster attacks Japan. So there's a huge subplot, and there's I'm not sure if you guys are have ever sat down and researched all the Godzilla stuff, but that movie is kind of controversial because in the Japanese version, the Russians accidentally fire a missile into the air. And in the American version, that was the height of the Cold War, and they make the Russians the bad guy, and they fire a nuke at Japan, and then the U.S. shoots up a anti-ballistic missile, their air defense artillery, and it knocks down the nuke. So then there's a nuclear cloud in the air, and that wakes Godzilla up. But that's kind of cool. Is the one, there was controversy about it, so that's fun to research. And then so I'm like everybody else, I'm a Lord of the Rings fan. I try and listen to the audiobook of Lord of the Rings like once a year.
Nice.
And one thing that kind of gets explored there, but you don't really see it in the movie and you kind of forget about, is that Sauron, he's kind of like an H.P. Lovecraft character, because Sauron also wants to be worshipped. Mm-hmm. And like that's not entirely explored, but like my first two novels, Dark Lord of Oklahoma and Dark Elf of Oklahoma, I wanted to explore that. And when I present my Sauron like character, I use kind of the H.P. Lovecraft influence, where there's a cult of people that worship my Dark Lord of Oklahoma. So there's like a church that's been gutted and remade for human sacrifices and all this other stuff. And
dig it.
Yeah. And so like, I just like, that's what I think is cool about horror, is like, there's going to be second and third order effects. Like if there was someone like Superman, there would naturally be a cult that would be like, hey, we need to worship Superman. It wouldn't be like even The Boys or one of the more realistic ones. I think that, and you see that in the death of Superman kind of story arc a little bit.
Yeah. A little bit, yeah. I read the whole thing. It's been a while, but was there a cult that followed him after his death, I wonder?
Well, there was a cult that like was fighting that followed the Cyborg and then followed the Eradicator.
Oh, okay. I didn't know they had followings. That's terrifying, because they are both terrible individuals.
Yeah.
I kind of like, it's a guilty pleasure. I kind of like the Eradicator. He was like the Punisher in Superman in one.
Yeah. And he had a really cool suit. That was I remember reading that comic book series with my dad, and the suit was awesome.
Nice. Next two questions I'm going to ask are also a pair. I'm going to start with the more difficult one first, and so we can end on the positive one. But do you remember the first person you hurt?
No. Okay. Like I was a boy, so I was out playing in the woods. So no, I can't remember the first person, but
okay, that's fine. Do you remember the first person you helped?
Probably the earliest memory. I remember visiting my great grandfather, and they were trying to get him up out of his seat, and I helped. I gently pushed on his back as he was trying to stand up. So like that was me thinking I was helping, but probably wasn't. But you know what I mean?
No, you thought you were helping. That counts. Right.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Moving into teen years, what were some of the scary stories or books or movies that influenced you during your teenage years?
Well, I already said Seth, The Fly, and Jeepers Creepers, and like this is how obsessed I am with The Fly. Is I think I've watched that almost every year, at least since 2015. I watched that once a year. Mm-hmm. And then Jeepers Creepers, I probably watch that at least once a year or two. I've watched Jeepers Creepers multiple times, not enough to where I have it line by line, but those were the main two horror movies that scared me as a kid. I do remember watching Friday the 13th on TBS.
Which one? There are many.
Oh, well, all of them. So they had they had a marathon going on.
Yep, as you do.
Yeah, and so I started with Friday the 13th, the first one, and then I watched all the way through. I don't think it was in one sitting, but I watched 1, 2, and 3. I was like the second one probably the most, because that's when he had the sack head looking thing, and I thought that was really cool. And then the third one, obviously, he gets the hockey mask. The fourth one, and then the fourth one, that's it's been a while since I've watched that one, but I've heard a lot of people talk about that, how important that one was.
Fourth one was the one with Corey Feldman where he made the masks, right?
Yeah. and then the fifth one, like they said, so the fourth one is like supposed to be really dark, and then the fifth one is kind of silly and is like comedy horror at points. And then of that, Kane Hodder shows up in the seventh one, and I actually was able to get Tina Shepard. That's her fictional name, but Lars Parr Lincoln. I was able to Laura Parr Lincoln. I was able to get her to write a review of my book Meth Gator. So
That's
I was
awesome.
Yeah, I was really excited about. But I was terrified watching those for some reason. Like, because I watched them when I was like 12 years old. So not well, no, maybe I was 13 at the time. But I remember being terrified by Jason Voorhees.
I mean, they're appropriate. They do a good job at it.
Yeah.
The Fly. What did you like about The Fly?
Oh man. Okay, so multiple things. Like
so many things.
Yes.
Such a good film, you know?
Yeah. First off, you got the score by Howard Shore. Howard Shore is most famous for Lord of the Rings, but he also did the theme to Silence of the Lambs. And so I love the fact that instead of going with like synthwave or anything like that, which they could have done, and I think other people might have been. Yeah, it could have worked, but like I really think that classical score is really powerful.
Mm-hmm. It's like reminiscent of the Hellraiser score. It's just got that orchestral feeling to it, you know?
Yeah. And so first I love the music. Then it's kind of funny because the way it's kind of marketed is it's this slow transition, and it is a slow transition, but that story has a breakneck pace, and it goes from point A, point B, and it just goes bam, bam, bam. So like every scene leads into to the next scene, and the scenes are kind of short. And I try to write that way. I've kind of gotten in trouble for writing that way because I write short scenes, but I have multiple characters. And the thing that I learned from David Cronenberg is he was able to make that masterpiece with 3 characters. And like, I'm so jealous of that because like, yeah, there's 3 characters. Like there's,
you're right.
Yeah.
It's Seth, it's Gina Davis,
yeah,
and
Ronnie,
her douchebag boyfriend. That is it.
Stathis.
Yeah.
And like, in terms of speaking lines, I think there might be 7 people. Oh, I think speaking lines, 7 people. So I wish I could write something like that, but I've heard what is it? There was a quote about writing that said, "I'm sorry, I couldn't write you something shorter, so a long letter will have to do."
Samuel Clemens.
Yeah, man, that's a great line. And so like I always have way too many characters, and that's kind of the complaint. But I was obviously influenced by Lord of the Rings.
Writing is easy. Editing is the hard part.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, and in leadership, we learn 3 to 5 is the best span of control. And I think that kind of like, if you have less than 3 people underneath you, you're going to micromanage. And if you have 6 or more, you're going to kind of be lost. And like, you can see that David Cronenberg was really able to develop that because he had and again, I know I sound nerdy saying this, but he had a really good span of control over those characters. He had those 3 characters. So, and then I'm a guy, so my wife said it's not a romantic story, but I thought it was a romantic story between Seth and Ronnie.
Yeah, it totally was.
Yeah.
Friday the 13th. Unstoppable antagonist is a phrase that you had used earlier in this call. I'm guessing that was probably also the reason that you like Jason, or is there something else to it?
Yeah. He just keeps on going, and I would love to be able to explore, like, slashers are really simple, and it's funny, like Halloween. I think that came out in 1979. When they talk about that franchise, they said, hey, that was lightning in a bottle. And like in terms of like the box office that he had, I can't remember. They made it for like less than $1 million, and it's grown into one of the most popular franchises ever. And, you know, like, I understand like how powerful movies are and how powerful those the fan bases are, but I don't think anyone is ever expecting any of the Halloween movies to be as good as the original.
Pretty much, yeah.
So like,
I would agree.
Yeah, they're all slashers are all really simple, but I would love to like kind of explore that, like, and I try to do that a little bit in the Dark Elf of Oklahoma, but I think that might be a little bit much because I don't when I wrote Dark Lord of Oklahoma, I basically want to have Lord of the Rings and set it in modern day Oklahoma, but I didn't want everything to like be a copy and paste of Lord of the Rings. So the Nazgul in Lord of the Rings, that are the silent Sentinel. Well, I mean they talk in Lord of the Rings, but they're lieutenants for the Dark Lord for Sauron. I changed those out, and in my story, my Dark Lord, his Sentinels or his lieutenants are slashers. So they're I wanted to have like, and then I like sketched out like, now Freddy talks, but Jason, Michael Myers, Leatherface, Hatchet, they're silent. They've been trained as a child. You wouldn't call them serial killers because that doesn't fit.
They don't really have an MO. They're more of like a continued spree killers.
Yeah. So instead of the Nazgul or the Ring Race, I have slashers that are the lieutenants to the Dark Lord, and they all have motorcycles. They're like chopper style motorcycles.
They're steeds.
Yeah. It's so clever, but so simple. Like like sometimes I think everybody that's a creative person like looks at Halloween and it's just like, man, I'm jealous of how he was so effective. And then the other thing is, if you really look at it, he had studied a lot of those Italian giallo films. So he was writing what he knew. So like it wasn't luck. Like it was very simple, but he knew exactly where to put the characters, how to put the characters. So it's really interesting.
You're right, though. You did have a lot of less is more style in especially the original Halloween.
Yeah.
In recent revisitings or like documentaries or research on the film, a lot of people have been pointing out how Michael Myers is actually hidden in plain sight in a lot of the film, in a lot of the scenes. So yeah, Carpenter, he put some thought into the whole process there.
Yeah.
And then his favorite. Go ahead.
What's that?
I was going to ask a question, but you wanted to say something?
Oh, and then you now like I said, I usually like the full orchestral music, but he goes with the synth music, and I can't remember his time signature.
Oh yeah, it was 4/5s, I think.
Yeah.
Or 5/4.
5/4. And they said that like is so weird. And that's another thing is like, I'm really curious. Like, I don't know how you could ever research that, but like how many movies wouldn't have been as effective without good music? And, you know, like Friday the 13th, that was written very low budget, but that's got a very signature sound to it as well. With the
it does, but you know, other than the papas, I revisited the series again recently because we had a Friday the 13th. I made it as far as 6, and yeah, and watching like the first 2 especially, I'm like, you guys just straight up ripped off the Psycho soundtrack because there's a lot of strings and sharp strings, and there's even a part where it's slightly different, but it's the like,
yeah,
everybody was doing that for a while.
I think so. Yeah, I think it was very common in a lot of horror movies.
It's funny you brought up the 5/4 time signature because Chris and I are also sort of amateur musicians, and we're actually the ones who wrote the intro and outro for our podcast, and it's in 5/4.
Oh wow, that's awesome!
It is in 5/4.
Yes,
I forgot about that. I was going to say, and I've written a song in 5/4, but
yes.
that one was also in 5/4.
Yes,
yeah. I like non conventional time signatures. They're fun.
Same. Did you have a favorite costume, Halloween costume in your teens?
In my teens, I really didn't do Halloween in my teens.
Okay.
Yep, not uncommon.
Yeah. Which like is unfortunate now. It's like man, being a teenager is weird because like there's like so much going on. In fact, like I think they said like if you analyze the brain of a teenager, is a 12-year-old in some ways is more prepubescent kid, like 12 years old is in some ways more rational than a teenager because of the hormones. So I saw the trick-or-treating as like a kid's thing. And I was like, oh man, I'm too big to go trick-or-treating. And I actually remember, because I was about 6 feet tall, a little under 6 feet tall. I'm still under. I was 5'11" since the 7th grade, and I was like, oh, I'm going to scare people if I go door to door dressed up like this, and so like I thought I was like too cool for school, and now it's like, man, that's like now like
Regrets.
adults cosplay, yes. So yeah, there's plenty of regrets.
Did you have any really scary dreams as a teen?
Mainly just the reoccurring Jeepers Creepers coming after me. And some of the body horror stuff.
Anything in real life terrify you as a teen?
I won't go into the details, but I got into a fight where I got beat up kind of bad. So that was kind of scary, but that was weird because it was bad thing, but it wasn't really scary because there was so many other emotions going into it, so.
Was there ever a time in your teens when you felt completely calm or safe or at bliss?
Yeah, plenty of times, like hanging out with good friends. And I had a really good network growing up. So unfortunately, like I know Stephen King had a really good relationship with his brothers and his mom, but like I don't have anything dramatic in my youth or anything like that. I had really good friends and I've had a really good support system since then. So like I've had a lot of times when I was a teenager feeling calm.
Mm-hmm. I just realized while I was writing, I wanted to ask, you mentioned a second ago about, getting beat up, and there were some emotional connections or something wrapped up in there. Was there something there that you felt comfortable talking about or no?
I don't want to really go into it, but it is kind of funny. So I pretty much lost all my front teeth.
Oh.
And then I spent the night in the hospital, and it was all over a calculator.
Jesus.
Yeah, it was something really dumb. Like I said, like a 12-year-old, their brain is more rational a lot of times than a teenager's. It was my dad's calculator, and I felt like I was allowing my dad to be disrespected by someone stealing his calculator. And it was another teenager, so it was really, really dumb looking back on it. Teenage boys, like a lot of hormones going on,
Sounds like one of those life lessons where it's like almost I got lucky because it could have been a lot worse.
Yeah.
Which is I'm at least glad that it didn't turn out worse. There's that. Let's see. In your teens, you mentioned hanging out with friends. Were any of your, and actually I forgot to ask about this earlier. Let me flip this around a little. Going back to the childhood section, you said that your father watched Frankenstein meets Wolfman with you. Was anybody in your family fans of horror?
Yes. So my dad would watch horror movies with my cousin and my foster sister. And I recently talked to my foster sister, and she's like, and it's weird to think of horror as like a calming thing, but she's like, I remember watching those scary movies with your dad, and it was community, like we were both watching something, and then like as writers and as fiction people, like we talk about, you don't want people to think, you want people to feel. And so like with horror, that was like a community, because obviously, like I said, like John Carpenter put a lot of thought into Halloween, but like they were feeling all those emotions, like all that suspense, and it was fun. And she's like, I remember watching that with your dad, and that was a good memory. Which is, like I said, it's funny, but I mean, the title of your show is Horror Makes Us Happy, so I think it's appropriate.
Yeah, very appropriate.
Moving into adult years, what are some of the standouts in your adult years that have impacted you?
So I've been in the military since I was 23. I do not have a combat deployment, but I've got I was an airborne unit, so I've got like 33 jumps. So that's obviously really scary, jumping out of an airplane, but you have to learn to respect it. And that's what I think is cool about horror, is like you're scared, but you like have this respect. You know what I mean? So like you're like, man, I know this scares me, and then like not even, you do it self-consciously or like subconsciously, like, okay, I can watch Halloween, or I can do this, but I know I'm not going to want to walk out in the woods by myself or something like that afterwards. And of course,
it's a safe, contained, scary.
Yeah. But that was practical in some ways, because when you're in an airborne unit, what you'll notice is if you think about jumping the entire day that you have a jump, you're going to be exhausted and you're going to be stressed out. But eventually you get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm going to be stressed out once they open the aircraft and I can hear that giant sucking sound. Or you're going to be able to you're going to break down the fear to like, I'm going to be scared for 10 minutes. And you can do that. And I think like there's been other stories or other studies like on horror, like some of the benefits of horror is something like that, where it's like, okay, I know how to contain my fear, or I know how to use it in certain ways.
It's therapeutic almost.
Yeah.
That is an interesting topic. I'm going to hold on to that for a minute. Let me think about that for a minute. Talking about media, though, in terms of books or movies or stories, has there been any media that has jumped out to you?
I did watch. Oh, you know what? That's something that I forgot as a kid. I saw the movie Dagon. I saw that when I was like 18 or 19, and that one like freaked me out. And that introduced me to that. That is a trope or archetype. Is like the town with a secret, and I love that. I love that, and I try to explore that a little bit in The Dark Lord of Oklahoma, where my Dark Lord, he has that cult gets built up, and the whole town like worships him basically, and that is straight from H.P. Lovecraft. And the great thing about H.P. Lovecraft is he's public domain. So like you as a writer, you can use Cthulhu, you can use all this other stuff. Now I try not to do that because while you can use that stuff, there's I've heard comedians talk about like a creativity problem. It's like you don't want to get you don't want to be called a hack, but H.P. Lovecraft is like very, very much influenced me. Like he writes in first person narrative. He's got kind of an investigation on each of them, and that's really cool. And then, like everybody else, I really like Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy, and that stuff has probably subconsciously influenced my writing more than I realize. And then I'm a big Zack Snyder fan. And then in terms of media, like you kind of need to research a little bit of everything. And this will almost sound off topic, but not really, because he has done horror with The Terminator. Arnold Schwarzenegger, he talked a lot about marketing. And that's actually one of his rules in his recent book. But like, so he was a championship bodybuilder, but at the time when he was a bodybuilder, people thought that was really weird. So he's like, hey, he had actually had an internship in marketing, and he's like, I've got to go out and I've got to sell bodybuilding. Otherwise, people were going to be beating us up all the time. And so he goes out and does that. So those are the concepts in terms of marketing and things like that. But I'd say H.P. Lovecraft has probably influenced me quite a bit as an adult. And then when you explore or you kind of analyze, I realized like I really like epistolary style horror. I love epistolary. So Max Brooks, World War Z, and then have you guys read De-Evolution?
No.
Oh, it is so good. World War Z is obviously really cool, but Max Brooks's De-Evolution it's really interesting, and it's also really scary. It's about Bigfoot, and it's a lost journal, and then it has like all these other mixed media in it, and it's really good. So Max Brooks kind of opened my eyes on what an epistolary style story would look like in modern day. So I threw a lot of stuff out there. But.
Yeah.
I'm
curious. When you said epistolary, I was thinking like abyssal, like some of the otherworldly stories that Lovecraft does. But what is epistolary? If you could expand on that. Okay,
so epistolary, that comes from the word epistle, meaning letter. And what's funny is like all the famous horror novels are epistolary. Frankenstein is about, I forgot the first character's name, but it's about a crew of people going up the Arctic, and then they stumble. So he's writing letters back to his family like, hey, we're going to do this. And then he finds Victor Frankenstein, and he starts rewriting everything that he did.
Basically, it's a literary version of found footage.
Yeah.
It kind of is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and Lovecraft kind of does that, like at the end of his stories, like they're coming, and then like someone dies mid sentence of writing. Like I
the castle.
yeah, yeah.
Do you have a favorite costume as an adult for Halloween, or are you even participating as an adult?
Oh, okay. No, not really. But all right. So I did cosplay one time at a Comic-Con, and if you see my Instagram, I'm about 6 feet tall and I have blonde hair and blue eyes. So I dressed up as Aquaman for a Comic-Con out in New Orleans. And no, it was Georgia. So that I did Comic-Con there, and like people went crazy for it. And it was just really simple. I had an orange Under Armour shirt, green Under Armour pants, had some boots that I spray painted green, the same color as my pants, and then I took a Dark Knight utility belt, and I had some green gloves, and people went crazy for it. And it was just really simple. And so that was my favorite one. And like, yeah, so that was a lot of fun. I'm not sure if I still have pictures of that or not, but that was my favorite one.
It's kind of funny. I was expecting you to go to something like Master Chief.
Yeah.
Like Halo or something. How about a least favorite costume as an adult?
It wasn't as effective, but I'm a big DC fan. And my wife and I went as specifically Lois Lane and Clark Kent. And so I had a suit tie on, and I wore a Superman shirt underneath, and I wore glasses, and because I have blonde hair, I wore a wig. And so I thought the wig was kind of silly, but I still had fun with it. So that I would say the wig was my least favorite part.
Okay. Until you said the wig, I was going to say, make a joke about the connection being dressing up in suits.
Yeah.
Some throwback to your childhood there. Do you have any scary dreams or repeating dreams as an adult?
Okay. So I've worked in law enforcement, and I've actually learned something is bad dreams are, and this will kind of go back into like some of the good things about horror is bad dreams in law enforcement are actually a good thing, because it means you're thinking through problems. So like I've had multiple dreams, like where scenarios where something goes really south. So I've had those dreams, but what's funny about all that is I still have Jeepers Creepers and Brundlefly dreams, like even as an adult. Like it,
you ever like a combination of the two? Like something goes bad at work and it's Brundlefly behind it all.
No, but that would be a really good. That'd be a really good story. Well, that's kind of the story of Tusk with Kevin Smith.
Yeah,
I guess it kind of is. Yeah.
Have you ever been actually terrified of something in real life as an adult?
Last week, I stepped over a rattlesnake.
Oh, nice.
Ooh.
Yeah. So there's that. And then I get really creeped out by like people that are narcissistic. And so rattlesnakes and narcissistic people, where you're just like, they make you feel uncomfortable. Cause like the other thing that really helps out with law enforcement and with writing is you can, if you know about your gut and like all the things that your gut does. So like your gut is, I can't remember all the technical things, but that gut feeling is actually part of your brain. But when you use your gut, your stomach is actually tightening because of a signal. And like someone smarter than me could explain that, or
instincts.
Yeah. And so you've got that. And then like you've got like the micro hairs on the back of your neck, and like you should always listen to that. So, but then when you're writing, you're always said show don't tell. And so like as soon as I saw him, the micro hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Like you should explore that as a writer. And then like my wife, I'm like, hey, if you go out and something feels weird, but a lot of women are in touch with that. Like women probably understand the gut more instinctively than guys do, like sometimes. And there's like a lot of theories on that, but yeah. So like thinking about the gut and like how to articulate that and And Edgar Allan Poe kind of talks about it in one of his short stories, is like people will try to
rationalize.
Yes. And then what was that movie with Justin Long?
Barbarian?
It's a Justin Long horror movie, which he's
been in a few. There's Jeepers Creepers, of course. Was it the one with the witches, the house where he was like a house guest and they started coming onto him and turned out they wanted to kill him?
It was Barbarian.
Okay.
Have you guys seen that one?
Saw the end of it, but he does a lot of justification at the end of that one.
Yeah,
he does.
And that one, there's a lot of good things about that. But the writer and director, he actually read a book that a lot of law enforcement are told to read. It's called The Gift of Fear.
No shit.
Yeah. And so he's like, okay. And so what is really cool about that story is, and like horror is really interesting because you can actually learn a lot of stuff from horror. You know, like I remember I was joking with someone's like, I did have good driver's ed coaches, but I don't think anything has taught me to respect the road the way Pet Sematary did, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
very true.
Oh man. Hey, did you know that from what I read, Stephen King, when he wrote that story disturbed him so much that he didn't finish it for a year?
Huh. I believe it.
Yeah. Which like I've never, like, you'll hear authors joke about that. It's like, man, I kind of freaked myself out, but I've never freaked myself out as much as Stephen King probably did writing Pet Sematary.
Flipping that question around, was there ever a time in your adult life when you felt completely calm or safe or bliss?
Yes. So I actually kind of explore that in some of my books. Is there's the vinyasa style breathing, and I have probably written vinyasa style breathing in every single one of my books. And I've got a good relationship with my wife, and my wife like really can calm me down. So I've had plenty of times when I've felt bliss as an adult.
Okay.
Is that just like circular breathing, or?
So I've been taught two different techniques, and one was belly breathing, and it's where like your stomach exhales. But that one was kind of technical and complicated for me. And then at another academy, one of the firearms instructors took me to the side and was like, hey, here, do it this way. And he's like, breathe in for 4, hold for 4,
and then exhale for 4.
Yeah. And he called that combat breathing. I can't remember who came up with that idea, but that's something that, and I've tried to teach my kids that. Of course, they're a little bit too young for that, but yeah, the combat breathing, that's supposed to like really, if you can control your breathing,
it's like a micro meditation.
Yeah. You know, and one thing that I always think is funny, and like as authors, like you learn like dialogue is really not supposed to, like, people use the term authentic dialogue, and people want authentic dialogue, which authentic to me just means that it ties into your genre and to the characters that you've created. But like people do not want realistic dialogue.
No, they do not. I was thinking about this just the other day. Like, authentic dialogue is clunky and interruptive, and it's fast, and yeah, literature and cinema dialogue is paced. It has prose. You know, you can follow it. Whereas, like I was telling Steve at the very beginning of this call, I was at a potluck with a bunch of friends the other night, and there were 6 adults having 2 conversations, and all their children in the background doing the scream cacophony. So it's like, yeah, real life dialogue is like that.
Yeah. You want every character to have like their own incentives. And I think when I'm talking with my kids and my wife, like I'll be talking about something and they'll be talking about something completely different, and you have to like connect the dots. And I think that's like really good for writing, but like actually realistic dialogue, like if someone gets into an argument, they don't make intelligent points at all.
It's cyclical almost.
Yeah. And that's, and then I was taught by a guy named Dr. Gentz, and he had a PhD in psychology. He said that when you get really excited and your beats per minute of your heart go up, that your brain can't function, and it's called the OODA loop, and your brain just gets stuck in that. So I was like, if someone really gets into an argument, they wouldn't be like, you can't handle the truth. They would say something like, long-term care insurance is better than cryptocurrency or something, something ridiculous, where they've had it on their mind and they've just been thinking through it like multiple times.
Filibuster. What?
Yeah.
I said filibuster.
So the next two questions we may have already kind of touched on.
Yeah. And you already answered them earlier.
Yeah. Normally the next question is, what movie have you watched more times than any other? And this is not just horror, but any movie. You mentioned that you had watched The Fly and what was the other one? Jeepers Creepers once a year, every year. Is there any other movie, even outside of horror, that you watch more often?
Yes. I would say probably the movie that I've watched the most in my entire life is a Western, and that's True Grit with John Wayne.
Okay.
I have seen it and I've read the book 3 to 5 times. And when I was like 11 years old, I had a lot of the dialogue memorized. Yeah, and it's like, that's just kind of funny. Yeah. So I've watched that one multiple times.
What do you like about it?
First off, I'm from Oklahoma, and so that whole thing is set in Oklahoma. And then there's a lot of interesting stuff about Oklahoma, and that's like, I'd almost say that's like Oklahoma mythology in some ways, because you've got, and I had family that are from Arkansas, and Maddie Ross is from Darnell near Yale County. My family was further west than that, but so there's that. Then it ties into Isaac Parker, the hanging judge, and I had done some research on him. And then the federal marshals in Oklahoma. There's this nonfiction book called the Okla Hombres, and it's spelled OKLAHOMBRES. And and so it's about, which I think that's really interesting because it kind of explores like how culturally, like places like Oklahoma, Texas, we're tied to like the Spanish language and Mexico too. So there's like interesting bits of that, and then everyone's recovering from the Civil War at that time. So you have that, and then you have like the best scene ever. Like, I think like the Ride of the Rohirrim from Lord of the Rings and Rooster Cogburn taking on all of Ned Pepper's gang, all of them on horseback, both scenes on horseback. Like, those are like two of my favorite scenes ever. So True Grit. And then I've watched Lord of the Rings multiple times. The first Rocky, I've watched that multiple times. Batman vs. Superman.
Do you see any common threads about what kind of horror you like? Cannibalism, cult, metaphysical?
Oh, man. I really like cults. And like, I was joking with someone is like, I have a friend that in college that recently emailed me and is like, hey, why don't we all go on a camping trip? And like, that's like a common trope for a lot of horror. It's like friends that haven't seen each other in years, or a long lost relative like, hey, come over to my house. It's like, oh man. And it's like, yeah, of course I'm going to come, but just know that like, as a horror author, like this is kind of ominous.
No, it's going to be great, guys. We're going to get in touch with Wilderness. And by the way, I want this to be authentic. So everyone leave your cell phones at home.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And still, I think Slasher's really interesting because it's so simple. And like, I'm jealous of that because I can't really write simple. And then anything Lovecraftian and like Dagon, like that one really spooked me. And like that one made me sick to my stomach the first time I saw it. And so
they peeled that guy's face off.
Oh man, there was a lot of gross parts in that movie. Oh yeah. I know which one you're talking about.
So this would be the part of the call where we would talk about, identifying common themes that keep coming up and maybe talk about that a little bit. In your case, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, if you think there's either I'm off the mark, or if you think there's something in addition to what I'm about to say, feel free to add that. But the three sort of things that I hear coming up multiple times have to do with power and control and maybe heroism. There's a lot of common themes about, superheroes and kaiju, unstoppable antagonists, which, if put towards evil would be evil. But then there's also things like, heroism with the True Grit and the superhero stuff.
Yeah.
Even Godzilla, and I think at least one movie, is kind of like on the side of good type of thing. So it's basically more of, it's basically more about, I don't know if I will use the word hero worship, but that's the first phrase that comes to mind. do you think that's accurate in terms of what it is that you get out of horror, or do you think there's something else or something in addition to what I just said?
No, I think you're right. And one thing, like going back to, I said I really like the Christopher Nolan Batmans, and he nails the bad guys. And what's funny is, if you heard about how they made those, they're like, hey, we're going to focus on Batman because the other Batman movies have been more focused on the bad guys. And the Dark Knight trilogy does focus on Batman, but the bad guys are excellent. Like you've got Ra's al Ghul,
Yeah.
and then you have the Joker, which is an anarchist, which is like there's like, and all these people are attracted to him. And then you have Bane, the anti-Batman, and he's really cool. But by upping the ante of the bad guys, Batman looks so much cooler because he's got to figure out all that stuff.
So having sort of zeroed in on this, any idea why it is that you like this stuff?
I don't know. Always been attracted to action type stuff. Like I played football, joined the army. But like at the same time, like I've never wanted to be a bully. You know what I mean? And that's what I think is cool about superheroes is like you'll hear a lot of in military and law enforcement, like not everyone is good with the public. I'll just say that. But like what I think is cool about like Superman is like you'll see him take on Darkseid and then he's really good with the public too.
Yeah.
Like in that now I haven't watched the series, but that Superman and Lois, I can't even remember his name, but he's talking to some kid and he's like, yeah, the kid's like, hey, I like your suit. And he's like, yeah, my mom made it. And then he flies off. And like, I think that's so cool. Is like to be the superhero that can go fight Darkseid and then turn around. But having said that, John Wayne's character, True Grit, is not that hero. But for some reason,
yeah.
But you know what? Like Rooster Cogburn, he was very kind to Matty Ross in his own sort of way. And then like you don't pick up on it till you're older. But like he was completely keeping the Texas Ranger away from Matty Ross. You know what I mean? Like when you watch it as a kid, you just think he's making fun of him, but he's like making sure that like an inappropriate relationship with a minor does not happen, you know? So like you could kind of say that Rooster Cogburn is like a traditional good guy in that way, but in every other way, he is not. He's kind of an anti-hero, but he made sure that Matty Ross was taken care of.
Okay. Makes sense.
So now having peeled back one more layer, the next question is why horror? Because couldn't you explore these things in other genres? Yeah.
And I would consider my books urban fantasy. And clearly the answer is yes. So like I think horror is really cool because you can explore a lot of stuff. And then horror, you can jump from different subgenres inside of horror and it doesn't really upset the audience. Like for instance, the Halloween franchise, you have the first one that's 100% set in reality, you know, like that one could happen. Then the second one that continues on that.
And the third one goes a little bit of a different direction. Yeah.
Yeah. And I still have never watched the third one, but I've heard like a lot of people talk about it.
It's good.
Yeah.
That kid's face explodes into snakes.
Oh, really? I've heard the making of stuff about it, and I've heard some really, and like the other thing they said is the bad guy in the third one is like way worse than Michael Myers.
Kind of, yeah, because it's more nefarious. It's like an Illuminati kind of thing. Yeah, they tried to go a different direction with 3 and make it more of an anthology thing, and there was going to be no more Michael Myers, but the public said no.
Yeah, and it's funny because like. Mark Twain said, "History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes."
Yeah,
and then you saw the same thing with Friday the 13th with Part 5, The New Beginning. They're like, "Hey, we're having someone else, like we're having a murder mystery," and no one liked it.
Nobody had it. Nope.
Yeah.
Going back to the conversation about auteurism versus emotional reaction, I'm kind of surprised because it seems like a lot of the answers that you're giving for this part of it have to do with the auteur side of things. And I kind of thought I was thinking that you might go towards the emotional connection to horror. So I'm wondering, there are some people that we've interviewed who would just say, I am just a horror fan and that's that. But then there are other people who have said, I'm not just a horror fan. I do love horror, but I am a fan of XYZ in addition to horror, whether it's action or adventure or film noir or hero stories and things like that. And so I'm wondering, is that the case for you? Or would you say you are a fan of this larger thing that horror is just a part of? And that's why you're saying just it's now a choice for me to be an auteur in this particular genre as opposed to that other one? Or do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I would say that, and horror is like a really good place to like, start, you know what I mean? And I don't mean that like stepping up and going into different genres. Like you have to respect horror for what it is. Cause I think like people can read, insincerity really quick. So like the Godzilla 1998, the American version.
And the one with Matthew Broderick?
Yeah. So like the writer directors, I think they wanted nothing to do with the original Godzilla.
And that's where they went wrong.
Yes. And so like, and people can pick up on it, like, that's insincere, you know? So like, you have to be sincere to whatever you're doing.
Right.
And like I said, I think I'm more, I would call my stuff more urban fantasy, even the kaiju type stuff that I do, but like very strong horror elements. And like one thing that horror has really taught me is you have to have that initial hook. Cause like one time I tried to, with Call Lake, I really like Epistolary, and I tried to start like with to my dear friend, blah, blah, blah. Here's a record of the events, the way Bram Stoker wrote Dracula, not word for word, but like the same style. And then my publisher, like he saved my bacon because he said, hey man, you got to redo this. And it's like, we have to have that initial hook. And like, that's what horror teaches you, is like, you have to have like, okay, this is promising your audience this. You can see the style here. There's going to be surprises and things like that, but you've got to promise the promise of the premise, basically. And like, I think slashers teach that more than anything.
How so?
Well, because I think probably the one that does it the best would be Indiana Jones, with the initial one, because like you get to see what type of character he is. You get to see like he's weighing out how much an idol is worth in his hand. He miscalculates, which that shows that like he's maybe a little bit too cynical about the supernatural, even though that's what he studies. And then you get to see him be creative and active in his way out of there. So you get that is Brandon Sanderson, because I've watched a lot of his stuff. He calls that the promise of the premise. And then he fails in the end. And like there's a lot of like making your characters fail makes them more relatable and all that other stuff. So like, yeah, that's great. But there's this Save the Cat. It's a book on writing. And one thing that they pointed out is like, as soon as movies came around, novelists, like we have to compete with movies. So like you need to be studying other things and studying movies as well, because there's a lot you can teach. And like, I can't be boring as a writer. I've got to keep that pace going. And I like the pacing I learned was from The Fly. With David Cronenberg, where it's like boom, 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 one scene after another, and each scene ties into the next scene. Although some people that have read my stuff would not agree with that, but like all my scenes do kind of tie one. It goes 1, 2, 3, just with multiple characters. I think I threw a lot at you right there. But yeah, like horror films, like the initial hook. If you want to learn about promise of the premise and that initial hook that you got to get your reader in, like. I think like 80s horror is probably the best way to do that.
It's kind of funny because the last question here that we always ask is there anything else that you've thought of that might be relevant but hasn't come up on the call? And you kind of already just went into that.
Yeah.
So maybe was there anything that you thought of earlier in the call and then the conversation took a left turn and you didn't get a chance to say?
No.
Okay.
Like you guys have done a good job of keeping me on track. Like I can get all over the place. And like my books like have a lot of different elements in it. So like you can kind of see that.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
Mm.
So
And what was the name of the one that you're going to be?
Meth Gator.
Yeah, thank you, Meth Gator.
yeah, Meth Gator is out right now. So
Cool.
you can get it on Amazon, and it's only 99 cents on the e-Kindle or $9.99 paperback. And the paperback is beautiful. The creator that put so I had a really good cover, and then the Primal Publishing, they actually formatted the book and they did an amazing job. So
Nice.
it looks really good.
It is a nice cover.
We'll put together a bio page for you, and we'll link to whatever you want us to link to. We'll get that information from you offline and put it together.
Okay.
So thank you to you, and thank you to anybody out there listening. Please do come visit us at horrormakesushappy.com. You can check out Ethan's bio, the links. You can purchase merch from him and or us. Support us on Patreon, all that kind of fun stuff. And if you can't do that, then just tell a friend.